Hi folks, Florida Man here, and we've come to the end of the line, I'm afraid. This is the last video in the Basics of England series. It's a little bit sad to say goodbye. But this is Basics of England, Last Blood. Here we're going to go over how you go from an England who's survived the early game and killed off at least one of his rivals to being the conqueror of Europe. We're examining endgame positions from 100 games where England soloed, and we're going to try to reverse engineer some strategic ideas about how you get to the desired result from these maps using our experience, knowledge, common sense, and statistics. Hopefully this video will help you figure out how to clinch the win when you're in the position to go for the solo as England. It almost goes without saying, but in all the English solos reviewed, England had all of its own home centres plus Norway. In 96% of English solos, England had a French centre, and in 75% of English solos, England had all of the French centres. In 91% of games, England also had some part of Iberia. In 98% of English solos, England had a German centre, and a full 72% England had all of the German home centres. In 98% England had Holland, and in 96% England had Belgium. These are sort of the lowest of the low-hanging fruit. In 96% England has Sweden, in 97% England has St. Petersburg. Again, basic, don't know how you solo as England without these. What's a little more surprising is that in a huge 47% of games where England solos, England gets Moscow, which is across the stalemate line and should theoretically be difficult for England, a naval power, according to most perceptions, to secure. What's even more surprising is that in 52% of English solos, England had Warsaw, so more than half. So England is more likely to hold the centre that's further away from St. Pete. The only explanation I can think of for this being possible is that England frequently builds up a land force to break through Germany and into Eastern Europe, and that's apparently an excellent investment. Or alternatively, England breaks into Moscow, also requiring a land force, loses it, but still ends up with Warsaw because it's very hard to defend all of the Russian homeland against a prolonged attack from a strong enemy, and it requires more resources than Russia actually possesses in its homeland to do so. England also gets into Sevastopol in 18% of English solos, which seems like it would be overkill, since by the time you get that far, you'd surely have more than enough centres. England had Tunis in 57% of English solos, which makes it seem pretty essential. In a huge number of games, that will be the 18th English centre, even though it's on the opposite side of the map from those Russian centres, and frankly it should be an easier play than getting Moscow or Warsaw, as I think these statistics bear out. However, England only had an Italian centre from the Italian homeland proper in 28% of English solos, barely more than the 19% of English solos in which England had an Austria centre, or the 11% of English solos in which England had a Turkey centre. Insane as that sounds. Apparently, it's hard for England to break into Italy. Most of what we get from this analysis is common sense and reflective of what we've discussed in previous videos. You want to take out one of your neighbors as quickly as you can in the game typically. You want to take control of the corner with St. Petersburg and or the corner with Iberia when you can. One of the takeaways from this for me, though, is that England is not actually as much of a naval power in a solo bid as you would think from its reputation. The game requires England to invest in armies in order to pull out the win, which should not be surprising because there are no supply centres in the sea. England can win with as few as 5 armies, or as many as a dozen, but it's more typical to finish the game with somewhere from 7 to 9 armies in the event of an English solo. So although the early game will likely see you as a mostly naval power, you should bear in mind that in order for England to be truly influential and win, you have to get a significant number of boots on the continent. Where the armies go is a lot less important. If you're in a Western Triple, they're probably going to enter the continent through St. Petersburg and try to break into Moscow and Warsaw. As we said before, England enjoys ownership of Moscow in almost half of English solos, and Warsaw in slightly more than half of English solos, and where that happens, those centres will almost always allow you to win if you can hold on to them for long enough. which again takes a fair number of armies. England taking possession of those centres requires a weak land-based opposition to England and a strong English land-based force. The easiest route to an English solo, though, and the most probable, is to obtain all of the centres on your side of the stalemate line, that is, all of Germany, all of France, plus St. Petersburg, and also obtain Tunis. For that, a lot of armies is also required because armies are the only way to reliably hold on to Munich. But in that scenario, you would have emphasized defeating France early and getting into the Mediterranean so you could secure Tunis when the opportunity arises. If you can get into the Mediterranean without defeating France, that might also be good, but it's unlikely to be successful unless your persuasion of France is incredibly powerful, and there'd always be the opportunity for France to backstab you and take Tunis away. So to get to the end game where you have Tunis, it's probably best to make France a pretty early target and then prepare your navy to go after Italy. The best alliance for the other common solo route might be the Western Triple, assuming you pick just the right moment to get rid of one partner and you continue to be allied to the other up until near the endgame. The Anglo-German alliance seems to me to be the alliance most likely to ultimately result in the English solo overall, because it gives you the option of emphasizing the Mediterranean naval engagement or trying to invade Russia through St. Petersburg, and Germany can sort of help either way, at least with the land-based parts that he will be good at. In foreign policy matters further away, I note that Turkey is still alive at the time of endgame in 76% of English solos, and I don't think that's a coincidence. Italy was still alive in only 47% of English solos, Austria in 49%, and Russia in 35%. I would say this shows that a dominant Russia in the east is likely to be pretty bad for England as far as solo prospects, and on the other hand, there is a strong commonality of interests between England and Turkey. The one's survival is mutually beneficial and increases the solo chances of the other. So you should use your foreign policy power to keep Turkey alive, at least as long as you can, if that's possible, and he will likely prove to be a thorn in the side of your future enemies of Russia, Austria, and Italy. To recap, build armies as soon as you can responsibly do so, and put them somewhere on the mainland in Europe when you can. Aim to give yourself a strong hold over the St. Petersburg corner and or the Iberian corner so that you can further advance and secure a hold across the stalemate line as soon as possible. Try to keep Turkey alive through your foreign policy if possible, without necessarily making him dominant in the east, and of course eliminate one of your neighbors as quickly as you can to make your expansion further into Europe efficient. This last tip is applicable to almost all of the powers in diplomacy. And this wraps up my Basics of England solo formula. I hope you've enjoyed the Basics of England series. We've now gone through the basics of playing as each and every country on the classic diplomacy map. If you've enjoyed what I've been up to, I hope you'll give this video a like and comment with your idea for what should be next on my agenda. I have lots of ideas of my own, still, but I consider it absolutely worthwhile to get your thoughts on what this channel should do in the future. And if you feel invested in this channel, you should subscribe to ensure you receive regular diplomacy content recommended in your YouTube feed. We especially appreciate our Patreons, who have gone beyond subscribing to invest in the channel financially and receive extra content as a result. It's never a bad idea to consider joining the Florida Man Diplomacy Patreon, link in the description below. Until next time, Florida Man, out.